Hey, this is Take Taylor, and you're listening to Be Heard Ministry. This is part 2 of the spiritual release. What I mean by the release of the spirit from the body, I meant that actually the release of the spirit while still in the body. It releases from any bonds of encompassing it. And then only truly then can, experience complete peace and live free in life of, as God's children. Like after being baptized, like a child, you have the spirit and it's free in its original condition in which it was given. Now, do you know what happens to it afterwards? Well, it's easy to guess. It's the world. And then the customs and the environment, it implants in it many impressions and many bonds bind it, and it hinders its movement towards God, to be united with Him and abide in Him. What God's children seek is to be freed from all that, and to have their souls released from the bonds of the world and the environment, and from bonds of the senses and human wisdom. And at that point, perhaps some think, of words of the Jesus Lord Christ. Unless we are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, unless you become as young as children, no. He wanted to say, unless you become as great in the spirit as a child, or you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's big. There's people here that's, has to, that's fought with, all self-righteousness, people that has to overcome adultery and the love for money, and there's anger and bitterness, and I don't know, I think that when, us people get these impressions in our mind, they're planted and they're seated. And even though we know who God is and we can be as close as we can to Him, it still is there because of the way the world is. And you see it every day. It gets worse and worse. And people are more greedy, and all they care about is money, or the husband that once loved his wife and then all of a sudden is cheating and getting sadistically, trapped more and more, and then turns into murder. This world is a crazy and evil place. And I think that, the bonds of the senses make a person discriminate between man and woman, between an old woman and a young girl, and between a beautiful girl and maybe one that's not so. I think that, you can't, you must not be, affected by anything, whether this be praise or insult. And you can, you can meditate and stay in faith and be close to God, but until we actually, go to heaven, and we're not ever going to have that joyous, free of bondage and the memory of evil swept from our mind. And while you're here in this world, in the flesh, we're going to have many impressions of our senses. And this makes us look upon, worldly and material things and as being more beautiful and attractive than they really are, and as having a deeper effect. However, when the spirit is elevated and released partly from the bonds which hinder us, the senses will be elevated accordingly. In other words, they'll be released from the worldly feelings, and you'll have a new spiritual understanding of matters. You can feel this if you were away from your family for a long time, and you return and they embraced you in excessive love and longing. You felt overwhelmed by their love, but would you amidst this love feel that the person who embraced you, whether your father or your mother, your sister or your brother, was a man or a woman? The same is the case of the person who rescues others in fires or drowning accidents. It's such a person felt that whomever he was rescuing was man or woman, a girl or a boy, he would expose himself, that person would be in danger of death, and it wouldn't matter. I think that would demonstrate the spirit is superior to the senses. I mean, there are even times when the senses are partly or completely suppressed because the spirit is engaged in things which are greater. And so in your spiritual life, you have to get rid of the bonds of the senses. Then you'll have a different view of things, and you will not be overcoming with the lust, or whether the lust of the flesh or the lust for money or women or the pride of life. You'll be like the angels of God in heaven and see everything as good as the Lord. If therefore your eye is good, the whole body will be full of light. And that's in Matthew chapter 6, verse 22. All my life, I grew up, and my grandmother and tried to, she always told me to do these great things, pray, she taught me those things. And I thought that my grandmother was perfect and very spiritual, And I thought she did no wrong. And, later on in life, as I got older, I found out that, that the pills that she took was not for, her stomach ache, that it was an addiction. And I was like really, really shocked and depressed and angry, and I felt kind of like I was lied to, She held this way of being so high up, and she didn't live by it. Now, we can, discuss the attitude of senses when one tries to understand and meditate on matters. The senses are physical and limited, and they're not able to approach God, who is unlimited. And the senses are also fallible and quite often mistake between what is wrong and what is right. And even the apostles were mistaken when they returned to the Lord, joyfully saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And the Lord replied to them, "Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this." And likewise, the murderer who kills for revenge or honor feels, content as if he has done a great deed. It's a wrong feeling, certainly, You also may have various feelings during your, prayers, seclusions and meditations, and, examine them well, for they may be unsound human feelings. I try to feel free and try to feel the spirit, because sometimes I don't, I'm learning. And another point, which I'd like to say, is that when one is completely involved in trying to meditate on matters, one can become unaware of the world and of things around them. There's an example. like Hannah was, in the temple and she was praying in the bitterness from her soul before the Lord, and she was not aware of anything around her. And Eli, the priest, thought she was drunk. And he approached her saying, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away, and if you are completely involved in your prayers and your meditations, you won't become aware at all of anything that may take place around you. And there may be some people talking near, you, or there may be some noise or various scenes, but you won't even have a knowledge of that because you're so absorbed in the spiritual matters. Your senses are partly passive, and it's your spirit which acts. Consider this, that the spirit is the case and it's caught up. Sometimes people, question about who's a sinner and who's a saint, and a lot of times it has nothing to do with any relation to whatever they're being asked. In fact, most of the time people are trying to play the blame game, and we just need to realize that we can do everything and all things through God, and our spirit can truly be released into a good eternity. Have you ever seen man or woman, human, I believe that through time and experiences, good or bad, is wisdom. And however, we speak about only things that are worldly things, but how many of us really talk about spiritual things and actually aren't afraid? Because there's times that there's so many things that I want to tell people, but they look at me as though I'm crazy, as though I really don't speak to the Lord. All my life I grew up believing that I couldn't say that I heard things, because then you were schizophrenic, or if you've seen something that was not humanly possible to what man thinks, it was mental, disorder. I lived a life of learning how to play a bunch of lives, because in this world, they don't want to hear anything that's spiritual or of God, because maybe they're so far and distant, they don't actually hear Him. Apostle said one time, is however we speak wisdom among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age, nor of the ruler of this age, who are coming to nothing, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery. So, if you really want to learn God's intentions, you have to release your spirit first from the human wisdom and stand before God as ignorant and lacking of knowledge and understanding. Because it's only then we really will be filled with knowledge. And that knowledge, which is spiritual and perfect, not human and defiant. For the Spirit searches all things, deep things of God. And I think that, that Paul certainly meant this when he said, if anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. It said there was once a man that was a withered hand, and he came to the Lord, and he asked him to be healed, and the Lord ordered him to to stretch out his hand, and the man stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other, and that's in Matthew. And this miracle plainly demonstrates the power of the Lord, but likewise it shows how the human wisdom must vanish. See, if that man had given a chance to the human wisdom to interfere, he would have argued, how, can I stretch out that hand? Though it was withered. I mean, it's possible that a withered hand be stretched out. And if I can stretch out, why do I need to be healed? May you heal it first so that, I may be able to stretch it out. This would have been a case, but the man made himself a fool that he might become well. He ignored the human wisdom, guys, that says a withered hand cannot be stretched out. It's the same wisdom which does not believe that a mountain can be removed from its place as that a person can walk over the water, or that one must not be concerned about tomorrow. See, I believe human wisdom even made people examine God, his attributes and his doctrines, as if it was a, miscrupled thing. It also made some people accept only what conforms with their news regarding the Bible and the church and the laws, and, refuse whatever their, intellect does, not approve of. But on the other hand, God's children accept everything, simply, without any objections. They say, Lord, do you want us to walk through the Red Sea? Well, then, we shall walk, because certainly you would, prepare us for a road across it so we may not be, drowned. And there's a legend which says that the waters of the Red Sea were not divided when Moses stretched out his hand with the rod over the sea, but only when the first person put his feet in the waters. It's just a legend, but it has sublime spiritual meaning, And I truly believe that spirituality is in the desert or in the Mount differs in the manner from spirituality in the city. See, all my life I lived in the country, and I lived in a very secluded, place. And though there was people amongst me that were very violent people and did very bad things, I never saw those things. And one of the most troublesome bonds was when I came into the city and being enclosed within those walls. I used to hate the farm. I used to hate that life. Couldn't wait. And I got into a big city, and I was surrounded by things that I didn't know. And my grandmother used to say, stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. Boy, I had to walk through that path. And let me tell you guys, it was a journey. A lot of the time I was thinking I wasn't going to make it, and a lot of times I didn't want to, and there was a lot of scary times. And there are many days that I still wish that I was back on that farm in Alabama. Seriously. It's amazing how one can go through life and then finally see that, through pain and suffering, and you can actually find a little peace. Not that peace that, has been truly released, as I believe I haven't had that. But I truly have been able to say that through everything that I've been through, I couldn't have made it without the Lord. And it truly showed me more and more each day that He does exist. Now, your spirit, I believe, wants to be set free, to fly like a bird which flies from one branch to another. I believe it wants to be like the angels who are always singing praise to God without any bonds or restrictions. If you can't attain this constantly, at least let it be on certain occasions. It makes me imagine that anything can be reached more easily and deeply. I believe that, mountains and deserts, I imagine all that we shall have, the ability when we get rid of the bonds in the body and go high into heaven where God, the angels and the saints are, I believe. And, I've been, in some places, and I've always believed in God, and though I've been distant sometimes, guys, I'll tell you what, the most scariest and the most tragic things, that I went through is when I truly, truly, really found out that God loves me so much. And I knew He loved me because that's what God does, but no, I actually felt Him. I actually felt Him put His arms around me, and it was so wonderful and it was so great. And I was in a place where I should have been very worried and very, scared, but I wasn't. Because even though I was in a place where I was surrounded by nothing but walls, I was happy. And there was no distractions. There was, I really, really, I felt Him. I always knew He was near. I always could hear Him, but I actually felt Him. It's really hard for many people to, feel Him, So I say there's more. There's more deeper and more sublime level of spirituality. And there's another level too, is that the next level is to being aware of the four walls. In that case, you can sit in your room so absorbed in your prayers and meditations or readings that you are no longer aware of what's around you. You may live in another world beyond the senses, so you don't know whether you're in a room or, or behind a wall. You don't even know whether heavens have come down to you on earth or you went up to heaven while still on earth. As I'm getting older, and no, I haven't learned nothing, as I feel I've learned a lot. Something but nothing, I'm still learning. There are certain persons who could not realize whether they were in the body or out of their body, such as the Apostle Paul. And, St. John of the Assault and the Spiritual Old Father, the topic of the release of the Spirit from the bounds of the place leads, to meditate on another subject, which is in the Revelations. And we've heard about the Revelations experience, the beloved of, Paul the Apostle, and the time is lacking to mention what was experienced. And, they said that the other saints who left their places and experienced living environments where they saw things which cannot be described or expressed in words. And here's a story that I heard. It says one of the beloved brothers of a priest who was full of spirit, when that priest was praying the Holy Mass, he came to the words, he lifted his eyes up, and he also lifted his eyes, and here a deep silence prevailed in the church. And minutes passed while the holy priest was looking up in silence, astonished and distracted. And they say that a long time passed, and the congregation was silent, looking at the priest, and the priest lowered his eyes and went on with his prayers, deeply not aware of the pause which had passed. And one of the followers told him after he finished his prayer, he said, what happened? And required, he wanted him to explain. He was confused, and he didn't reply. But the man kept pressing, and the priest said that when he looked up, he saw the church as if it were no dome or ceiling, and there was a big ladder between the altar and heaven. He looked at it for just a second or more, and as it seemed to him, and he went on with his prayers. I wonder how some think of, of that as a way for, ministry, while, some people may have seen that as a calling for ministry, and I might have looked at it and saw it as heaven. It's a great feeling, and a lot of I like to read those stories because it's a continuous striving help the spirit to be released and united with God. I think there's so much to be said in that respect. But I'm going to close now, and I'll let you think about that. This has been Tankum Taylor, and you've been listening to Be Heard Ministry. Bye, guys.